right? I know we all face them. All right, good morning. Welcome. This is day 2 of Module 1, Lesson 4. We're going to finish up the notebook on federalism, and we're going to review for the Module 1 assessment, okay? So you're going to want to have your notebook open if you haven't already. We're going to get into Canvas, okay? Here's where you can access the notebook. We did 1 and 2 on Tuesday, and if you missed that class, then remember, go back to the recording and you can watch that where I go step by step, okay? And we're looking at basically federalism. Who has the power? And the reality is that it's shared, okay? The federal government is not all powerful. The states are not all powerful. The federal government definitely has more power than the states. And it was designed that way, right? So we had balance, because the Articles of Confederation put the states had too much power. So it was like 13 little mini countries doing whatever they wanted. It was destined to fail. So you have to have central leadership. Someone has to be in charge. Even if you don't like the leadership, you need it for stability. You need it for consistency. It's just, it's what we need. So we looked at the compelling question, who has power? And the reality is it varies. And then number 2, and remember, you could either do it in the Venn diagram or you could just make lists. Okay, and we went over delegated powers, and we just went ahead and put this in our notebook. Okay, concurrent powers, which is both that they share, and then reserve powers, which is the states. So if you miss those, you'll need to go back and you can either create lists, but you can literally just use this information, or you can edit. I'll show you that really quick. So you can make the lists, right, where you can literally just do like delegated, concurrent, and then just do the lists underneath them, like we talked about. Or you click on this, double click, and then it lets you edit it. Okay, so there's one of 2 ways you can do that. Either is fine, just making sure that you break it up. Okay, any questions on that before I move on to today's? We're good? Okay, give me a thumbs up. You have your notebook open, you're ready to go, and you got Canvas open. Awesome. That's all right. So we're just getting the notebook open. We're picking up where we left off. Or you could do that. If you're able to copy and paste it off the thing, you could do that. All right. As long as it ends up on your paper somehow. Okay. So we're doing Module 1, Lesson 4. Okay. And we're going to pick up where we left off on Tuesday. We're going to start with number 3. All right. So if we go back into Canvas, we're using those tabs, right? Okay. So we looked at this Venn diagram was really nice because it gave us a snapshot of what are some of the things that the federal government's in charge of, what's the things that are concurrent, which means shared, states and federal could do. And then reserved is what the states can do. Let's look a little bit at this balance of power. What do experts say about the balance of power between the states and federal government? Now, this document gives us like 7 different opinions, okay, from different, law professors, constitutional analysts, political experts, people that have been in politics or dealing with the law for a long time. So we're going to look at some of their individual opinions of who should have more power or how should this balance of power be broken up. But before we do that, we're going to watch a quick just overview video again of just kind of federalism and understanding that it's a spectrum, okay? And the pendulum's always swinging. So sometimes presidents will be more for state powers. Some will be more for federal power. So we often see it shifting. Or sometimes with the social issues of the day. Definitely in the last decade, we've seen some conflict between parties and on certain political topics of who should have the say. And I'll give you some examples of that after after the video. Okay, so here we go. So we'll watch that, okay? And then we will continue working on our notebook. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics. And today we're going to talk about a fundamental concept in American government, federalism. Sorry. I'm not sorry. You're not even endangered anymore. Federalism is a little confusing because it includes the word federal as in federal government, which is what we use to describe the government of the United States as a whole, which is kind of the opposite of what we mean when we say federalism. Confused? Google it. This video will probably come up, and then just watch this video. Or just continue watching this video. So what is federalism? Most simply, it's the idea that in the US, governmental power is divided between the government of the United States and the government of the individual states. The government of the US, the national government, is sometimes called the federal government, while the state governments are just called the state governments. This is because technically the US can be considered a federation of states, but this means different things to different people. For instance, federation of states means ham sandwich to me. I'll have one Federation of States, please. Side of tater tots. Thank you. I'm kind of dumb. In a federal system, the national government takes care of some things, like, for example, war with other countries and delivering the mail, while the state government takes care of other things like driver's license, hunter's license, barber's license, dentist's license, license to kill. That's James Bond, and that's in England, and that I hope states don't do that. Pretty simple, right? Maybe not. For one thing, there are some aspects of government that are handled by both the state and the national government. Taxes, Americans' favorite government activity, are an example. There are federal taxes and state taxes. But it gets even more complicated because there are different types of federalism depending on what period in American history you're talking about. Stan, why is history so confusing? Stan, you can tell me? Can you talk, Stan? Basically, though, there are two main types of federalism. Dual federalism, which has nothing to do with Aaron Burr, usually refers to the period of American history that stretches from the founding of our great nation until the New Deal. And cooperative federalism, which has been the rule since the 1930s. Let's start with an easy one and look at dual federalism, in the thought bubble. From 1788 until 1937, the U.S. basically lived under a regime of dual federalism, which meant government power was strictly divided between the state and national governments. Notice I didn't say separated because I don't want you to confuse federalism with separation of powers. Don't do it! With dual federalism, there are some things that only the federal government does and some things that only the state governments do. This is sometimes called jurisdiction. The national government had jurisdiction over internal improvements like interstate roads and canals, subsidies to the states, and tariffs, which are taxes on imports and thus fall under the general heading of foreign policy. The national government also owns public lands and regulates patents, which need to be national for them to offer protection for inventors in all the states. And because you want a silver dollar in Delaware to be worth the same as a silver dollar in Georgia, the national government also controls currency. The state government had control over property laws, inheritance laws, commercial laws, banking laws, corporate laws, insurance, family law, which means marriage and divorce, morality, stuff like public lewdness and drinking, keeps me in check, public health, education, criminal laws, including determining what is a crime and how crimes are prosecuted, land use, which includes water and mineral rights, elections, local government, and licensing of professions and occupations, basically what's required to drive a car, or open a bar, or become a barber, or become James Bond. So, under dual federalism, the state government has jurisdiction over a lot more than the national government. These powers over health, safety, and morality are sometimes called police power, and usually belong to the states. Because of the strict division between the two types of government, dual federalism is sometimes called layer cake federalism. Delicious. And it's consistent with the tradition of limited government that many Americans hold very dear. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, some of you might be wondering, Craig, where does the national government get the power to do anything that has to do with states? Yeah, well, off the top of my head, the U.S. Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. This is what's known as the Commerce Clause, and the way that it's been interpreted forms the basis of dual federalism and cooperative federalism. For most of the 19th century, the Supreme Court decided that almost any attempt by any government, federal or state, to regulate state economic activity would violate the Commerce Clause. This basically meant that there was very little regulation of business at all. Freedom! And this is how things stood, with the U.S. following a system of dual federalism with very little government regulation, and the national government not doing much other than going to war, buying or conquering enormous amounts of territory, and delivering the mail. Then the Great Depression happened, and Franklin Roosevelt and Congress enacted the New Deal, which changed the role of the federal government in a big way. The New Deal brought us cooperative federalism, where the national government encourages states and localities to pursue nationally defined goals. The main way that the federal government does this is through dollar bills, y'all. Money is what I'm saying. Stan, can I make it rain? Yeah? All right, I'm doing it. I happen to have cash in my hand right now. Oh yeah, take my federal money, states. Regulating ya. Regulator. This money that the federal government gives to the state is called a grant and aid. Grants and aid can work like a carrot, encouraging a state to adopt a certain policy, or work like a stick when the federal government withholds funds if a state doesn't do what the national government wants. Grants and aid are usually called categorical because they're given to states for a particular purpose, like transportation or education or alleviating poverty. There are two types of categorical grants and aid: formula grants and project grants. Under a formula grant, a state gets aid in a certain amount of money based on a mathematical formula. The best example of this is the old way welfare was given in the U.S. under the program called Aid to Families with Dependent Children. AFDC. States got a certain amount of money for every person who was classified as poor. The more poor people a state had, the more money it got. Project grants require states to submit proposals in order to receive aid. The states compete for a limited pool of resources. Nowadays, project grants are more common than formula grants, but neither is as popular as block grants, which the government gives out Lego blocks and then you build stuff with the Legos. It's a good time. No, where the national government gives a state a huge chunk of money for something big like infrastructure, which is made with concrete and steel, not Legos, and the state is allowed to figure out how to spend the money. The basic type of cooperative federalism is the carrot-stick type, which is sometimes called marble cake federalism because it mixes up the state and federal governments in ways that makes it impossible to separate the two. Federalism, it's such a culinary delight. The key to this is, you guessed it, dollar bills, y'all, money. But there's another aspect of cooperative federalism that's really not so cooperative, and that's regulated federalism. Under regulated federalism, the national government sets up regulations and rules that the states must follow. Some examples of these rules, also called mandates, are EPA regulations, civil rights standards, and the rules set up by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sometimes the government gives the states money to implement the rules, but sometimes it doesn't, and they must comply anyway. That's called an unfunded mandate, or as I like to call it, an unfun mandate, because no money, no fun. A good example of this is OSHA regulations that employers have to follow. States don't like these, and Congress tried to do something about them with the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act, or UMRA, but it hasn't really worked. In the early 21st century, Americans are basically living under a system of cooperative federalism with some areas of activity that are heavily regulated. This is a stretch from the original idea that federalism will keep the national government small and have most government functions belong to the states. If you follow American politics, and I know you do, this small government ideal should sound familiar because it's the bedrock principle of many conservatives and libertarians in the US. As conservatives made major political inroads after the 1970s, a new concept of federalism, which was actually kind of an old concept of federalism, became popular. It was called, surprise, New Federalism, and it was popularized by Presidents Nixon and Reagan. Just to be clear, it's called New Federalism, not surprise, New Federalism. New federalism basically means giving more power to the states, and this has been done in three ways. First, block grants allow states discretion to decide what to do with federal money. And what's a better way to express your power than spending money? Or not spending money, as the case may be. Another form of new federalism is devolution, which is the process of giving state and local governments the power to enforce regulations, devolving power from the national to the state level. Finally, some courts have picked up the cause of new federalism through cases based on the 10th Amendment, which states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." The idea that some powers, like those police powers I talked about before, are reserved by the states has been used to put something of a brake on the Commerce Clause. So, as you can see, where we are with federalism today is kind of complicated. Presidents Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Clinton seem to favor new federalism and block grants. But George W. Bush seemed to push back towards regulated federalism with laws like No Child Left Behind and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. It's pretty safe to say that we're going to continue to live under a regime of cooperative federalism with a healthy dose of regulation thrown in. But many Americans feel that the national government is too big and expensive and not what the framers wanted. If history's any guide, a system of dual federalism with most of the government in the hands of the states is probably not going to happen. For some reason, it's really difficult to convince institutions to give up powers once they've got them. I'm never giving up this power. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course Government and Politics is produced in
Okay, so I know we went over a lot, but I think it's just a good understanding of over time, basically. So if you look at the trend since the Constitution was written and gave the federal government more power, what's been the trend the last 200-ish and 40 years? The trend has been toward the federal government having more power. Now, sometimes we've the old becomes new, like like he mentioned, in the 80s and 90s, we saw a trend actually giving some power back to the states. But definitely in the last 20 years or so, we've been in a more federalism trend, which is the federal government trying to make more decisions or limit or restrict states making decisions. And again, it's a constant tug of war. So that's not a shot at one or the other. And again, a lot of people are going to have different opinions on this. And a lot of times it comes down to topic. Okay, so what power are we struggling over? Should this topic be determined by the federal or by the state? So most people have kind of a general feeling if they feel the federal government should have more power or the states. But then also sometimes there'll be a debate about a specific topic. And I'll give you some examples today as we go through our worksheet. Now, the examples I'm going to give you today can be controversial. So I'm not trying to start controversy, but to actually help you understand those controversies maybe a little bit more. So it's not about taking a stance on the controversy, but understanding the heart of the controversy, which a lot of it actually comes down to state versus federal power and who has the power. Because everybody wants power. I don't care what party you're in. All right. Okay. So let's go look at number 3 and we'll get started. What do experts say about the balance of power between state and federal? Okay. So they give us 7 different political analysts. Okay. And they want us to summarize their opinions. I went ahead and we're just going to do 3 and I'm going to summarize them for you. Okay. So Laura Brown, she's the first one. Okay, she stated that according to the Constitution and in common practice, state politics are more present in and important in the daily lives of America. So there's going to be 3 parts to number 3. Okay, so that's the first part of number 3. Second opinion. So basically she says states impact our lives more, so the states should have a lot of decision-making power. Not as they saying that they should have more than the federal government, but maybe they should have more than they currently have. So when in doubt, maybe we should revert to the states because the states have the biggest impact on people's lives. So that's the first opinion. The second one, John Judas, states that the federal government is more powerful. It's in there and I'll read it. Okay. States that the federal government is more powerful than the state's government. So the question was settled in 1789. We shouldn't even be arguing over it, that the federal government is granted supremacy over state law. So at the end of the day, the buck stops with the federal government, according to John Judas. And then the third opinion that we're going to look at is Heather Gerken, okay, argues that one segment of government is not more important than the other. And basically it's fuels that the states help look out for the federal government and the federal government looks out for the states. So it should be this mutual equal relationship. Of these 3, I lean toward Laura Brown. And a lot of this has just come from my personal experience. When I was your age, I was so excited to vote and all I cared about voting in was the presidential election. I thought everything else didn't matter. And I've actually come to realize, don't get me wrong, presidential election is important. I'm not saying it's not, but I've come to realize that the impact on my life, and if you actually really, when you start to break it down and think about it, and if you ask your parents about it, what actually impacts their life, it's going to be local government. I love it when there's a controversial election and you hear people say, I'm going to leave the country, I'm moving. And I'm like, are you though? Are you really? Whether you love or you hate who's the president, past, present, or in the next election, okay? The reality is that most of the time, your day-to-day life doesn't really change that much. Still get up, you still do your thing, you still go to work, you still eat, the car's still the same, the house is still the same color, the street sign's the same, like you do your normal thing, like not much really changes when I love the president or when I am not a fan of the president. You know what does change my life? My local government, the city mayor, the local law enforcement, first responders, the how we handle, poverty, homelessness, drugs, how our school systems are handled, right? The quality of education that we have. Our governor, state legislative, city councils have such a big impact on you and I's lives. Okay. So for example, I live here in Henderson. So the fact that how they maintain the parks, if I can take my kids on the weekend and go, are they safe to go play or are they not? How do they deal with crime? Are we getting lighter on it? And is that helping or are we getting tougher on it? Like how that, speed limits, how that's enforced. My HOA, like my school board, I'm obviously not just being a teacher, but my kids are in CCSD. Those decisions directly impact my kids and me as a parent and you and your family. So those things I have learned actually, to me personally, matter more because it impacts me directly. If the city of Henderson makes a change, I'm going to see it because I live right here. When the federal government does something, oftentimes it's such big picture stuff that we have an opinion on it, but it often doesn't impact our day-to-day lives. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So as you get older, you'll start to pay attention to that more and kind of see that oftentimes we don't give enough credit to the impact of local government. And if you actually want to see change, if you're upset about something in your community, the best activism you can do is locally. Going to your city councils, going to the school board meetings, talking to your state politicians. That makes actually a bigger impact on your day-to-day life than what's going on federally. Don't get me wrong, federal is important, but I just don't think that we realize how much the states and the cities that we live in really impact us. Public opinion. What's public opinion toward federalism? Do people generally think that the federal government's doing a good job, or do we have issue with that? So let's take a look at this. A study from 2013 said that about 30% of people, so this was 10 years ago, that about 30% of people, so we're doing number 4 now, that 30% of people were unhappy or angry with the federal government. So what do you all think? Give me a thumbs up if you think it's higher today, or thumbs down if you think it's lower. Are we more satisfied with the government, or are we less satisfied with the government? What do we think? I'm not asking you to tell me your opinion of the government, just generally speaking. Liberal, conservative, you guys are reading the room correctly. Yes, absolutely, it has gone up. More and more people, myself included, are frustrated with the federal government, okay? And I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. I know so many people that are liberal and conservative, and they're looking at their own party. They're looking at Democrats, they're looking at Republicans, and they're like, this is my party, and I don't even recognize you, you know? I've felt that way. I've been like, I like half of what you're saying, but the other half, I'm like, I don't even know who you are anymore, you know? So a lot of people are feeling like they don't identify even with their own party, let alone the opposite party. I mean, that's normal to not identify with the opposite party, right? Because they're different than you. You have a different opinion. But a lot of people are feeling frustrated even with their own political party. They're like, what is going on here? What happened to exactly, Jackson? I think you're onto it. I think a lot of people, majority of people, whether you're liberal or conservative, are kind of more in the middle. And we're all kind of saying, like, can't we all just get along? Can't we just compromise and you get a little bit of what you want, I'll get a little bit of what I want, and we can move it along? You just want lower taxes? Story of my life. They will never get along. I know, Nicholas, it's very frustrating, but I think more and more people are over it. The extremes having their voice heard, and the people in the middle are like, what about just all of us folks here just trying to get to work and do our thing and just, you know what I mean? Get to the weekend, you know? Like, you know, protest. Well, you know what? I will say I have done more protesting in the last year than I've ever done. I've gone to school board meetings. I get really hyped up about education because I'm an educator and stuff. So I have more than I've ever done before. So yes, you can get out there. But you know where you see more impact? It's local. Protesting with the teachers here. I've been to city council meetings when I didn't agree with different things that they were doing with laws and stuff like that to make my voice heard. So yes. And you know what? I've actually seen some impact or effect from people coming out for the local causes. And it's actually encouraging to be involved in your local community. If you're into activism, I'm telling you, local, there is a payoff there. And not that you get your way, but you get to actually talk to the people directly who are making the decisions. Okay, another report shows, this is adding to number 4, another report shows looking at the different issues, individual states, a lot of individual states feel like a lot of social or kind of drug issues, so maybe like same-sex marriage, marijuana regulation, drug reform should be a state's issue, and federal should be things like defense, immigration, protecting general civil rights and liberty. And a lot of people maybe give or take a topic or two, and stuff. A lot of people, even on their party lines, might agree, not necessarily agree on the topic, but who should be making the decision, okay? So that's what we're talking about today. We're not taking stance on topics. We're talking about who, a lot of people have different opinions on who should. So let's talk about one of the controversial topics, okay? And not that we're talking about our opinion on the topic, but actually then a big part of the debate, which is who has the power. So last year's Supreme Court adjusted, right, Roe versus Wade. So for a long time, it was a federal decision on abortion, okay? So federally, so what the federal government decided, all the states had to follow. So when this new Supreme Court decision came out, what it did is it did not make federally abortion illegal. It made it a state's issue. So states then had the power to decide if it was going to be legal or illegal. So then, yes, you're going to see differences, right? State autonomy. Now, a lot of people have opinions on that, and I'm not trying to start a debate and stuff like that. But at the heart of the debate was, should the federal government be making that decision or should the states? And the Supreme Court threw it back to the states. So a lot of people agreed. They said, yes, the states should make that decision if it should be legal or illegal. Or a lot of people, no, they felt the federal government. So there were really, really strong opinions on who should have that power. And oftentimes the debate will heat up depending on the topic, right? Certain things are pretty easy to agree on. Immigration, it should be federal, right? We can't have every state having a different criteria for letting people in. That becomes nauseating and exhausting and it's already a broken system, so it would be way too complicated. Your borders, there's got to be one system that's regulated, right, and overseen. So there's certain topics where it's kind of, it just makes sense. But there are topics where it's hard to say. Another really good one, drug reform. So we see a total spectrum on drug reform in the United States. So that's a state's issue. So for example, Oregon in the last year or two literally has legalized every drug. So you cannot be arrested unless, so if it's over a certain quantity, you can be arrested because it's considered like dealing. So you're not allowed to deal drugs, like distribute them, but you can possess them. So that has been a huge shift in Oregon, okay? Where there are some states where literally no drugs, not even marijuana, is legal. So we see the full spectrum now, state by state, where some literally almost no prosecution of drugs, and other states where they prosecute every single drug, even including marijuana, which about half the states have legalized. Great question. Great question. We all know the answer to that. It's just don't get, do you see what I mean? Yeah. A lot of people who are critical of, okay, I will give you my opinion on this one. I think making all drugs legal is ridiculous. It's not going to solve anything. I have family. I'm from Oregon, and it's been really bad. The areas that I know of, the drug use has just skyrocketed. So I feel bad for everyday people who are just trying to live and stuff like that. And it's bad. I'm not saying that criminalizing all of it always solves the problems, but making everything legal and just an open show, it's pretty devastating to a lot of communities. So I don't know. That's a very hard topic, right? Because you can't just, well, taxing it's one thing, but when people can literally just do it everywhere and pass out on benches. So this, I'll give you an example. Last week of July, I went back to Oregon to see some family. Ashland, yes. So I went through Klamath Falls, which is a really small farming community. We stayed the night there. And then a lot of my family lives in like Corvallis, Eugene area. And literally there was this beautiful park right next to the hotel where we were staying. So I was exhausted. So my husband took my kids for a walk, and they walked by 3 people, literally, no ducks, beavers. Yes. The rivalry, right? Yes, exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about, that rivalry right there. So literally walking in the park, there were 3 people passed out on a bench with crack pipes right there. And my little kids are right there. And so obviously as a parent, that's super not okay. And like, so there's a lot of issues of what that's creating in the community and stuff. Arresting people, putting them in jail, that doesn't always necessarily though help with the problem as far as like rehabbing them, right? So you have to create a system where there's accountability, where people aren't doing drugs, but if they are, that they're hopefully being held accountable. Either you go to jail or you do rehab, like the whole goal is to not be on drugs, right? To live and be healthy. Yeah, it's a mess, but that is a state issue. So, right. So most states are somewhere in the middle. Like a lot of states, they've legalized marijuana, but then most other street drugs are not legal. So, but that's an example of a spectrum, right, that we're seeing. Okay. So, and again, topic by topic, there can be pros and cons to having that. And, I lean towards state autonomy on that, but again, pros and cons. If I was living in Oregon, I'd be really upset. That would not be cool with me. I certainly don't want them to do that here. I don't want them to make all drugs legal because I have small kids. I don't know any parent that wants their kids around that, There is a lot of money in the prison system. I'm not saying that's a whole nother thing, right? Of the prison system and how it's run. And there needs to be money put into programs. Like we need to hold people accountable, but when they go to prison, like, are we helping them get better? And they're not, right? They're just sitting there rotting. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, as I said, there's so many problems within the problems, right? Yeah. And the privatization of it, which makes it a moneymaker, 100%. It shouldn't be, it needs to be, we need to be putting money into systems that are going to incentivize people to get better, to rehab, right? To get better. If they don't, there's a consequence, but if they do, that there's a path back. For most cases, I don't know, if you commit murder, I don't know if I want you living next door. You know what I'm saying? Depending on the circumstances. But in most cases, you would like to see people have the opportunity to rehab and to, at some point, after a reasonable amount of time, right? There are consequences to crime, but at some point be able to go back into society and have some success, we'd like to see that. Again, super hard balance, right? There has to be justice, but then you can't just, in every case, lock them up and throw away the key. So it's a hard system. Yes. And welcome to political debates and political parties. And oh my goodness, right? And again, there's a lot of arguments for pro and con. That one I I lean toward yes with you, but then I can see instances where I wouldn't want that. So yeah, that one I'm not 100%, but I do think a lot of people kind of feel, or maybe it depends on the type of crime. I think that's for me, it'd be the type of felony, you know? So, but again, everybody's welcome to their opinion. Okay. We'll keep going. All right. So ultimately, what you're going to do in number 5, so this is the one you're going to do on your own, okay? Should state governments have the power to legislate what's best for the citizens, okay? And the reality is that it depends on the topic, right? It depends on the topic. So in some cases, the federal government has to decide. They have to decide when we're going to war, or they have to decide our borders. Like there's certain cases where they have to decide. But there are a lot of issues that are up for debate. When should states have power? When should federal? For example, drugs. You know, should that be federally decided or should that be state decided? Abortion. Should that be federally decided or state decided? Not how do you feel on the topic, but who should have the authority? Does that make sense? So that's what you're trying to do with this question, okay? So you're going to pick a topic and you're going to say yes or no on that topic. Because the reality is it's not a blanket statement. States should not have all the authority. Federal government shouldn't have all the authority. There's a proper place and time. And then there's those debatable ones, right? That people are going to have different opinions on. So pick a topic. Who do you think should have? Pick a controversial topic. Drugs is a great one. Human rights. So you could talk about like LGBTQ stuff. Who should be making those decisions? Should it be state or should it be federal? Abortion. That's a great one. Guns. That's a good one. Okay. We do have the Second Amendment. So so no states or federal can completely make it illegal, right? Because it is the Second Amendment to the right to bear arms under certain laws. But who should be making those laws, right? Should it be the states that should be setting the parameters, or should it be immigration's a hard one. If you make it states, the problem with that is you're going to have 50 different criteria. And that one, it almost has to stay federal because it would be we have so many immigrants here of different statuses, right? It would be like, so what, you get citizenship in one state, but what if you don't meet the criteria? So if you get, let's just say you met the criteria in California, but if you didn't in Nevada, then you can't go to Nevada. Like, do you see what I mean? That one has to be blanket. Not because I agree with the immigration system in this country. It's broken. I think it needs a lot of fixing. Democrats and Republicans have done nothing to fix it. They both have made it worse, in my opinion. But it has to be federally mandated. It would be so bad. It would be so bad. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because some might be too lenient. Everybody can come in. Well, you could be letting in criminals, and then some might literally let no one in. And the reality is, again, you have to have a system. You have to have a balance, right? Where people can come. We are a nation of immigrants, you know, and stuff like that. So we have to have a balance. States can tax. Yeah. So again, that would be, I think guns, that's a great one that you could write a yes or no and make an argument for why states should decide or why federal should decide. Again, oftentimes it's the controversial topics, you know? Okay. So pick one, write yes or no, and give reasons why. Okay. So yes, states should pick, tell me the topic, why, or no, states shouldn't, tell me the topic, tell me why. Any questions on number 5? Give me thumbs up if you understand what you're going to do on number 5. So you're doing number 5 on your own. Don't copy what's on the screen because that's just saying yes or no. You have to pick one or the other. So I won't give you points unless it's your personal response. So number 5, we're not copying. Okay, great. So again, it's always going to be gray. There's certain ones where it's like it has to be state or it has to be federal. But there's a lot of topics where again, it's debatable. Okay. It's debatable. All right. So pick a side, pick a topic and pick a side, because again, depending on the topic, that will probably change a lot of people's opinion, right? I might feel states should have right on this issue, but federal should have rights on this issue. Okay. Yeah. I'm not looking for opinions on the topic. I'm looking for who should make the decision, state or federal. So pick a topic, and it can be controversial like guns or abortion or something like that. Right. But who should make the decision, not what you feel the decision should be. Does that make sense? So like abortion is a very controversial topic, right? A lot of opinions, a lot of passions about that. But the big issue that people don't understand about the Supreme Court decision, a lot of people were saying they just made it illegal. No, they gave the states the autonomy to decide. So yes, in some states, they can make it illegal, they can put parameters, or they can make it completely open, right? You know, no parameters. So they made it a state's decision. So you're going to see the whole spectrum, just like drug laws. You're seeing the whole spectrum of drug laws, because it's states are deciding. Now, how do I feel about that topic will depend. Okay, so pick a topic and who should make the decision? Federal. Yes, basically the government or citizens being the state. Okay, all right, with the time we have left, I want to spend a couple reviewing. Yes, Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if like if we wanted to put like the government and the citizens to come up to agreement to see if like they wanted one of those laws to be a law, like can we do that?
No, because they're never going to agree. States always want to make the decision. Federal always wants more power. Do you see what I mean? So you need to give your opinion. So pick a topic and then you decide who should make the decision. Because they're never going to agree.
So which topic is for citizens?
No, it doesn't matter. So citizens is like states. You pick the topic and you decide. So for example, abortion. Do you think the federal government should decide, or do you think the states should decide? Gun laws. Do you think the federal government should decide, or do you think the states should decide?
What do you mean by state? Like everybody?
Like Nevada. No, like Nevada. There's 50 individual states. The state. Each state has their own opinion. Nevada's a state. California's a state. Idaho's a state. Oregon's a state. Each state would have their own opinion. Or does the federal government decide and the states just have to follow it? There's 50 states. Okay. Yep. So pick what topic, read the question, and do you think that on that topic, should the individual states get autonomy to make their individual decision? Like Oregon, all drugs are legal. Utah, no. Okay. Total opposites. Okay. I don't know how else to say this. Federal is the Washington, D.C. State is state. Who do you think should decide? Federal or the state? So pick a topic, who should decide? Federal, meaning Washington, D.C., or states. There's 50 states. So that means there could be 50 decisions. Who should make the decision? You have to give that opinion. Okay? All right. I'm going to move on. Come see me on small group if you need more clarification. All right. Okay, let's review. I've got your review sheet for the quiz. And remember, this is covering the entire module, so the first 4 lessons. All right, so go ahead and open that up. Let me know that it opens for you. Click on the link in the chat. It is long, okay, but it's long because I have every module in there, okay? So there's module 1 notes, there's lesson 1 notes, there's lesson 2 notes, lesson 3, and lesson 4. Okay, so I would definitely take some time to review this before you go take the quiz, okay? Because there is a lot of information on it. So you kind of want to familiarize yourself with where things are at. Okay, questions on this? Remember, you can use this on the quiz. So you can print it off and use it, or you can have an open tab. You just have to let the proctor know that there's accommodations for that so that they'll keep the tab open, right? So just like we've talked about every other week. This quiz, or I should say assessment, is longer. It's 30 questions instead of 10 because it's over the entire module. So it's over 4 lessons, right? Module 1, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4. So what we basically have covered the last 4 weeks. You get 2 attempts. It'll keep the highest of the 2. Yes, so when I say federal, that means the entire United States. That means Washington, D.C. is our federal government, right? Federal. Our central, the president and Congress. States, there's 50 states. So who should make the decision? Should each 50 states get to make their own decision, which means 50 individual decisions? Or should there be one decision, which is federal, Washington, D.C.? And then all the states have to follow that. Which? Federal is our central government. President, Congress. Yes. They represent the whole. All right, we're going to do a Kahoots game. All right. So please grab your cell phone, or you can do an additional tab. There's 10 questions. This is great review though for the assessment, because these are literally pulled right off of the assessment. All right. They're literally pulled off of that. So it's a little bit of fun. It's just 10 questions. So it won't take us too long. All right. But definitely worth joining. All right. So let's get started. So you might have your phone available. You can join, or you could do it on a different tab. I'll copy and paste the link into the chat here. 1 second once it opens. All right, let me copy this, put it in the chat. Okay, so you can go to www.cahoots.it and put in the code, or you can do it through the app. You can scan it. You can click on the link in the chat. You can use your name. You can use a code name, whatever you want. All right, we're doing this for fun. This is good review. These are actual questions off of the quiz. So worth your time. All right, so please join. Then when we finish this, you should have about 20 minutes left that you can work on that number 5, okay? Deciding, pick a controversial topic, and should the federal central government make the decision, or should the states have individual rights and have autonomy and can do what they want? So for example, immigration, federal government does it, right? They make the decision, all 50 states have to follow it. Drugs. I like 5 sentences. So 1 paragraph, so 5 sentences. So pick and then tell me why. Who should have the decision? What's the topic? And then tell me why you think the federal should have the decision or the state should have the decision on that topic. Awesome. Okay, we'll give about 1 more minute to join, and then we'll do this. Like I said, it's not too long. It's like 10 questions. But it'll be really good review because these are literally pulled from the test bank. So you'll see at least a couple of these on the quiz. Okay, give about 30 more seconds. So if you're joining, try to get in. So listen, even if you have to guess, okay? You got a 1 in 4 chance of getting it right. But again, this is great review for the quiz, the assessment, because it is bigger than the other ones. It's 30 questions instead of 10, so it's worth more points. So it can really help your grade, or if you don't study and review, it can bring that grade down. All right, we're going to get started. All right, here we go. So again, do your best to answer. If you're not sure, it doesn't hurt to guess. All right, we're doing this for fun. And these are off the test. Blank are something that cannot be taken away from people, even in the hands of the government. So think back to, okay, is this inalienable rights that can't be taken away, common good, state of nature, or civic virtue? We talked about this in lesson 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, do your guess. And it is inalienable rights. Okay, so good. A good chunk of you got it. So inalienable rights. So this is talking about going back to the British colonists, right, who were used to having rights and they were being denied by the British government. So when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they borrowed from John Locke, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of property, and they changed it to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? We talked about that. And saying, just being human, we should have certain rights. Now, we know at the original right of the Constitution and stuff that not all people actually were included in that. Women, minorities, slaves were not included in that, right? And so we've had a long history of getting to where, no, that actually means all citizens, right? All people, that gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, all those things don't matter. Just being human, being a citizen, I get these rights, okay, and stuff. So inalienable rights, good. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so a bunch of you on the scoreboard. So the way they do it, if a bunch of people get it right, then it's who responded first, okay? So again, this could be anyone's game, all right, but nice job. Here we go. John Locke's theory, which was following natural inalienable rights that cannot be surrendered or transferred. That the natural right of a judge to execute the law, the rights to inquire perishable goods, the natural rights of life, liberty, and property, the natural right to produce more than you can. 3, 2, 1. I just need the answer, basically. Yes, the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. So John Locke wrote down these specific inalienable rights that he felt all people should have. Governments should not restrict people from. All people have the right to live, liberty, freedom, and to pursue property. Because remember, in Europe, they were very restrictive. You had to basically be born into nobility, upper class. If you were middle, lower class, or any other status of slavery like that, you had no rights to own property. And John Locke said it shouldn't be that way. All right. Nice. All right. See, we're adjusting. People are moving up. Here we go. Anyone's game. How do governments tend to violate natural rights of citizens, according to John Locke? So John Locke said governments can be dangerous. Why? By becoming tyrannical, that means extreme, by providing too much protection, by limiting property ownership, or by promoting equality, according to John Locke. So again, from lesson. So we think 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, by becoming too tyrannical. And exactly, John Locke said the problem with governments, especially unchecked governments, is that they just continue to grow in power. And the more power they gain, they take it away from people. They expect blind obedience. And here in the United States, we are not about blind obedience, right? We want to question authority and stuff. So when they wrote our Constitution, they really tried to make sure that the president couldn't become a dictatorship, that the Congress could become a dictatorship, that Supreme Court can't just make any law they want. They tried to create a checks and balance to limit the government from taking too much power from us individually and the states. Now, they have a lot of power over us, but if I come out and say, I don't like so-and-so that's in politics, they can't just come arrest me. A lot of countries, they can, because they don't want anything that would question their authority. All right, nice job. Let's keep going. All right, we got a neck and neck here, whoever AM is and Dylan. According to Aristotle, who is free to enjoy political and civil liberties? So remember, this is back to the Greeks, okay, 500 BCE. So his definition and our definition is definitely going to be different from 3,500 years ago, or 3,500. Only those who live in oligarchy, only slaves, only those who live in democracy, or only non-slaves. And this was a question off the quiz from week 1. So according to Aristotle, yes, only non-slaves. So in Greece, slavery was very common. Slavery, unfortunately, since the beginning of man in written record, we see the practice of slavery. Even today, there are hundreds of millions of people still in slavery. And so Aristotle was saying, well, these liberties should be granted to people, all those who are non-slaves. Now, obviously, we don't see it that way, right? When our country is founded, we had slavery, but over time and Civil War, and then civil rights movement pushing that to mean really all people, okay? That there should be no boundaries in that as long as you are of age and a citizen. All right. And back on top. All right, here we go. The Constitution grants the federal government 3 types of power. So we did this last week. This is in lesson 3. Legislative, executive, judicial, legislative, express, civil, expressed, implied, inherent, or expressed, implied, supreme. But 3 types of power. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take your best guess. Okay. We're a little divided on this one. So some of you might have misread it if you chose legislative, executive, judicial. Those are the 3 branches of government that share power. So you are right, those are the 3 branches, but they're asking for the 3 types of power. So the 3 types of power given to the 3 branches is expressed, implied, and inherent. So expressed means it's clearly written in the Constitution. Implied means that, for example, like the president is in charge of the military, right? That's expressed. When they added the Air Force, it wasn't written into the Constitution. It was just implied because it's a part of the military. So it's just implied, like, oh, it just goes with the military. Inherent means naturally something a government would do. So for example, like borders, it's natural that governments are going to control and protect the borders, right? That's why you have governments. They have to protect, make sure that the right people are coming in, that, if we have an invasion, that we're protecting ourselves. Like that's the goal or the role of government. All right, and still on top. Oh, Frago, you are up. funny, the crown. A success under the Articles of Confederation was. So that's the first constitution. A lot of failures, but what was a success? Complete payoff of leftover war debt, ratification of multiple defense treaties with France and Spain, election of George Washington as the United States first president, or the Northwest Ordinance, which talked about states and banning slavery in the North. All right, so this one you guys are going to want to review. George Washington was not elected. Articles of Confederation didn't have a president. It was only a Senate with one member from each state. So remember, it wasn't till the Constitution that they created the actual three branches of government: executive for the president, Congress for the House and the Senate, and then judicial branch. So for the first 10 years of our country, we didn't have a president because there was no president. There was no central position. The Articles of Confederation made sure of it. This was one of the failures because no one was in charge. So everybody was like, what do we do? So the one success under the Articles of Confederation was the Northwest Ordinance. Okay, and we did talk about this. So it did two things. One, it allowed to expand and add more states. So they were 13 states to start, and their goal as people were expanding west was to grow the country. So they enabled to do that. And the second was actually the beginning of the movement to ban slavery. So unfortunately, it took till the Civil War in the 1860s to finally rid the United States, or, make it illegal and start to root that out, right, and free slaves. But it started in the 1770s with a lot of northern states. And we did talk about that. We'll talk about that a little more as we get to social movements. There had long been support for banning of slavery in the North because there weren't as many slaves. So a lot of people morally were on that page. It was the South that was very resistant because there were a lot of plantations. So there was a lot of slaves being used. So people were very resistant. They didn't want to end slavery because they were making money off of it. So it's terrible, but that was their reason. So at least we saw at least some movement in some states start to move toward ending slavery in the North. Unfortunately, again, it took almost 100 years to actually do that as a country, but we did see a movement in the North get started. All right. Oh, Dylan, back on top. See, this keeps going. Anybody's game. All right, here we go. A few questions left. What is the purpose of the Articles of Confederation? So what was the purpose of writing this first constitution? To give the most power to the central government, to establish confederation with Great Britain, to give more power to the states, or to establish a monarchy in a newly formed country. So the Articles of Confederation, who did it give power to, states or federal? We talked about this explicitly. Yes, it gave more power to the states. And this was part of the reason that it didn't work, right? It didn't work because it gave too much power to the states. So it was like having 13 independent little nations. They had to rewrite the Constitution to give more power to the federal government, our central government in Washington, D.C. And then the states, which now we have 50 states, have lesser power. All right, Dylan's still on top. Nicholas moved up a little bit. All right. What percentage of the state's overall budget comes from the federal government? So this was in the reading, and this could be a question on the quiz. So what percentage of our state government comes from the federal government? 50 to 40%, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. Take a guess. Take a guess. This is on the quiz, so this is good to know. You're not sure? Take a guess. 30 to 40%. Wow, a lot of you actually got it. Nice job. This is on the study guide too. So if you're looking at the study guide, you might have found it there. 30 to 40%. 30 to 40%. Nice job. Okay. Gabby, nice job. You're moving up. Dylan, you're making a little bit of a lead here. That's awesome. All right, here we go. 2 questions left. So keep in there. How many amendments does the Constitution have? That means how many times has it been changed? Okay, 100 times, 25 times, 27 times, or 13 times. We talked about this, and it is in the notes. Not as many as you. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments. 10 happen right there. All right, what we got? Good, a lot of you got it. Okay, 27 times. So that's actually not that many, really, okay? It is hard to change the Constitution, and they did that on purpose because they wanted to create stability in this country, that if we're going to make change, we have to make sure that we really, really want it, and that it's not just the extremes of the political party at the moment, which causes instability. So it can be frustrating that it takes so long or can be so hard to change the Constitution, but in the end, it does create stability by making it harder to do that. That document has it's like concrete. It's like a foundation, you know, that we can stand on. If it's sand and it can just change at any moment, it would be really hard for our country to be stable. There's definitely pros and cons. All right, Frago, you are up. Last question, anybody's game. Here we go. What was the cause of Shays' rebellion? We talked about this in lesson 1, lesson 2. A lack of representation for the states and the central government, high taxes and foreclosures on farms, the inability of central government to levy taxes, or the inability of central government to enforce upon states or individuals. Shays' rebellion, we've watched a little video on it, on the little animation. Okay, good. Higher taxes and foreclosure on farms. So this happened in Massachusetts. So what was happening, Shays' rebellion happened during the Articles of Confederation. And what was happening was, again, states were just going rogue and there was no consistency with taxes. So some were really low, some were really high and actually being pretty criminal. And Massachusetts was one of those. So this was one of the things that sparked a reconversation of like, if we're going to last, we need to be more consistent. We got to rewrite the Articles of Confederation. All right. Here we go, the podium. 3rd place, Frago, nice job. 2nd, AM, nice job. 1st, Caroline, great job. Awesome job, everybody. All right, and Salisha and Melina, you got honorable mentions. Awesome job, everybody. All right, makes it fun, good to review. All right, nice job, everybody. Let's go. I know. All right. So those are straight off of the quiz. So again, that review sheet, there's a lot of stuff on there. So I would go through and review the review sheet before you do the quiz, because there's a lot of information, and kind of familiarize yourself for where things are at, maybe even color code some things or highlight some things and stuff. So that can be helpful, because it is 4.5 pages or something, almost 5 pages. Okay. So it can be a little bit hard to navigate. All right. So we have about 15 minutes. Okay. So during these 15 minutes, what I would like you to do is go ahead and answer number 5. Pick a topic and decide. So pick a controversial topic. Some great examples: drugs, abortion, firearms. That was a really good one. Who should be making those decisions? Not what do you think the decision should be? Who should make it? Should states have autonomy? So there can be 50 individual policies or decisions, or should the federal government, the central government, make it and then the states just have to follow? So, and again, it'll depend on the topic. One topic you might feel like federal government should. Another topic, maybe you're like, no, individual states should have the right to be different or have some individuality. You could say it that way. And then tell me why. Okay, so I'll let you go a few minutes early, but we'll sit in here for about 10 minutes. If you have questions, let me know, but get that number 5 done. I want 5 sentences. Okay, so state or federal decision on what topic and why. Okay, and let me know if you have questions.